Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking into the book of Genesis, specifically Genesis chapter 34. This story is known as the Dinah incident, and, well, let's just say it's one that's ripe for discussion.
Yeah, you got that right. It's not your typical Sunday school story, that's for sure.
Definitely not. It really throws you into a whirlwind of questions about family loyalty, cultural clashes, and, well, frankly, just what people considered justice back then. I mean, we're dealing with some pretty heavy stuff here.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, it doesn't offer any easy answers. It really makes you think critically about the text and its context.
So, to kick things off, let's set the scene. We've got Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and she encounters Shechem, a prince from a different culture.
Right. And right from the start, we're hit with this loaded term, defiled.
Yeah, that word jumps out at you. It's like, okay, something happened here, but what does it actually mean in this context?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
To really grasp the situation, we have to put on our ancient Near Eastern culture glasses.
Okay, so like imagine a world where a woman's virginity is directly tied to her family's honor.
Exactly. It's a completely different set of social rules and expectations.
So even if Dinah and Shechem's encounter was consensual, which the text doesn't explicitly say one way or another,
It would still be a huge deal. It throws the whole social order out of whack.
and that's where things get really interesting, because Shechem doesn't just try to shrug it off.
Not at all. He's head over heels for Dinah and wants to make things right by marrying her.
He even goes straight to his father Hamor to get the ball rolling with Jacob's family.
Talk about serious intentions. He's not messing around.
And this isn't just a sorry about that kind of situation. He's ready to pay a hefty bride price to Dinah's family.
We're talking serious money and goods here. This shows just how much weight this situation holds.
Wow, so it's not just a transaction, it's a statement.
It's a public declaration of commitment, a way to compensate for the perceived loss of honor.
You'd think Jacob and his sons would be at least somewhat open to this, right?
You'd think so. But this is where the story takes a turn. Remember, this is a deeply patriarchal society.
Right, where a woman's honor is tied to the entire family's reputation.
And there's more at play here, too. We have to consider the political and territorial dynamics.
Like, how would intermarriage with the Hivites affect their tribal identity?
Exactly. And what about the potential for conflict over land and resources?
So it's not as simple as a love story gone wrong. There's a lot bubbling under the surface.
Oh, yeah. It's a powder keg of tensions waiting for a spark.
And that spark comes in the form of Jacob's son's response.
They are furious. Let's just say they don't exactly welcome Shechem with open arms.
Instead, they hatch a plan that's as cunning as it is ruthless.
And here's the kicker. They agree to the marriage, but with one very specific condition.
And this is where things go from complicated to just plain shocking.
They demand that every male in Shechem's city must undergo circumcision.
Whoa, talk about using religion as leverage.
It's a bold move, and you could argue a manipulative one.
They knew this ritual would leave the Hivites vulnerable.
It gave them a strategic advantage. You can see the deep divide between these two groups.
And their willingness to exploit each other's beliefs for their own gain.
It's a stark reminder that even sacred rituals can be twisted and used as weapons.
So the Hivites wanting the marriage and maybe not fully grasping the simmering resentment.
They agreed to the circumcision, thinking they're one step closer to bridging the gap.
Little did they know.
The tragic irony is that Shechem, driven by love for Dinah, readily agrees to the circumcision.
He really wanted to bridge the cultural divide.
But this act of good faith, this attempt to appease Jacob's sons, ultimately seals his fate.
And sets the stage for a truly devastating act of betrayal. I mean, it's just crazy to think about using something as sacred as circumcision as a way to gain power. It really makes you question just how far people are willing to go to protect their interests.
It definitely reveals a darker side of human nature.
Right. Yeah. How we try to justify even the most morally questionable actions, especially when we feel like our identity or safety is being threatened.
And it forces us to look at the role of religion in conflict, too. It's not always about peace and unity. Sometimes it's used to divide and conquer.
It's a sobering thought for sure, especially when we see how the story unfolds. While the men of Shechem are recovering Dinah's brothers, Simeon and Levi.
They launch a brutal attack on the city.
It's a complete massacre. They don't hold back.
No, they don't. The text is very clear about the brutality of their actions.
They kill every male in the city, including Shechem and his father Hamor.
It's this vicious cycle of violence. One act leads to another, and the consequences are devastating.
And what's even more disturbing is how Jacob reacts to his son's actions.
He's horrified by what they've done. He's worried about the repercussions.
But their response is chilling. Should he treat our sister like a harlot?
It's a justification rooted in their culture, but it reveals a deeply problematic mindset.
They're reducing Dinah to an object, a symbol of their family's honor, completely ignoring her own feelings and agency in all of this.
It highlights how patriarchal societies often silence and marginalize women.
And speaking of being silenced, Dinah's voice is totally absent throughout this whole ordeal. We're left wondering what she thought, how she felt, how this experience shaped her.
It's a reminder that history is often told from the perspective of those in power, leaving the marginalized and the voiceless out of the narrative.
And that silence itself is a form of violence?
It perpetuates the idea that women's experiences are somehow less important.
It's a gap in the story that we as modern readers need to acknowledge and try to fill with our own empathy and understanding.
We have to ask ourselves, what might Dinah have been thinking and feeling?
What were her hopes, her dreams, her fears?
Her story, or rather the lack of it, resonates with contemporary issues too.
Like gender inequality and the importance of amplifying marginalized voices.
It shows that these problems aren't new, they're deeply embedded in human history.
The Dinah incident also raises questions about how we interpret religious teachings.
Like, how can we reconcile the messages of faith and violence, peace and retribution?
It's a dilemma we still face today. We see examples of religious extremism all over the world.
And it often leads to violence and suffering justified in the name of a higher power.
It makes you think about how we can navigate these complex ethical landscapes and uphold values like compassion and understanding, even in the face of conflict and difference.
It's a challenging but essential conversation to have.
We can't shy away from these tough questions.
We have to grapple with the uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our capacity for both good and evil.
This story, despite its ancient setting, feels incredibly relevant to our own times.
It shows that the seeds of conflict, prejudice, greed, the desire for power are timeless and universal.
But it also offers a glimmer of hope. By acknowledging these darker aspects of human nature,
And by having open and honest dialogues about the ethical dilemmas they present.
we can maybe start to create a more just and compassionate world. You know, it's amazing how a story from so long ago can still resonate with us today.
Right. It's like holding up a mirror to our own society and seeing all the complexity.
All the messiness, the Dinah incident, it's not a story with easy answers.
Definitely not. It leaves you with more questions than answers.
Like, what does justice truly mean? And how do we reconcile forgiveness with such a horrific act?
It challenges us to think about different perspectives.
And to realize that our own interpretations are shaped by our own experiences in our culture.
And that's what makes it such a powerful text to study. It's not about finding one right answer.
It's about asking the tough questions and wrestling with those gray areas.
And recognizing that our understanding of these stories can change over time.
As we grow and learn and evolve as a society,
Exactly. These ancient narratives, they're not just static artifacts.
they're living, breathing texts that continue to speak to us across the centuries.
And challenge us to think critically about the world around us.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Dinah incident, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this story?
Well, I think it's important to remember that this story is about more than just Dinah and her family.
It's about the human condition, about our capacity for both incredible love and unimaginable cruelty.
About how culture and tradition can shape our actions, sometimes for the better, sometimes not.
And about the struggle to navigate a world where different beliefs and values often clash.
It's a reminder that the past isn't really past. It shapes who we are today and the choices we make.
And by engaging with these stories, even the difficult ones,
We can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world we live in.
and maybe find a path toward a more just and compassionate future. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Dinah incident,
It's been a fascinating conversation.
and we hope it sparks some thought-provoking questions for you to ponder. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep digging deeper into the stories that shape our world.